All right, and it's a good time to bring Craig in. Craig Stobo, welcome to the show. Well, Craig, can I ask you yesterday, did you have any opportunity at all to read Christopher Luxon's speech to the Chamber of Commerce?
Hello, Michael. Yes, I did. I skimmed it last night. It didn't strike me as presenting anything new, so it was an angle that you wanted me to have a think or talk about?
No, it's just that, well, I'm glad you said that it didn't strike me as anything new. And because Luxon is delivering, he says, a very boring budget and there won't be too many bells and whistles. Essentially, that was his theme yesterday, the Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah.
Is that what New Zealand needs?
Well, I would argue it's something about fixing, rectifying, balancing some of the damage that's been caused by the previous regime. How far they can go will be not just this budget, but the next couple of budgets as well, and the work in between. So what we do know is that they're going to change tax thresholds. They've told us that it doesn't mean they're going to be funding with more debt. There will be other revenue or tax changes. But fundamentally, when you look at productivity issues that I discussed last week, yes, there's some cuts going on in government services, which would normally mean productivity improves, but that's not the real issue that the OECD focused on, which was the things that I mentioned last week. So product markets, greater connectivity offshore, mismatches of labour. So this doesn't really, I'm not expecting this to address those issues. But there is one thing that people aren't talking about, as I see it, which is because of the deterioration in our debt, both on a gross basis and to GDP, there is an opportunity for the government to think about asset sales. And that does a couple of things. One is it introduces private capital to help drive businesses faster because the Crown's constrained by how much capital they can put into the businesses they own. They just don't have the capacity, but the private sector does. And secondly, that can assist with retirement of debt. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be in the budget, but it wouldn't surprise me if that was something that this coalition looked at as a pathway forward to improve productivity, but also to help retire some debt. So the answer to your question is this is not softly as she goes, but I'm not expecting more than what's already been relayed. It is a very matter-of-fact way of going through this next phase, but we need much more than that. So I'd like to see more courage around change. And which sort of brings me on to the competition, which is the Australian budget. Now, that was announced the last couple of days, and the challenge we face in New Zealand is that the Australians are going to cut taxes as well. So, but they're going to cut taxes for all of their 13.6 million taxpayers. They're going to bring in more housing. They're focusing on renewables, quite a bit more on defence. And so while their net debt increases, as a percentage of GDP, it's only going up marginally over the next 3 years from 20% to 22%. And here we are in New Zealand struggling to get from, low 40% down to 40% over some period of time. So our starting position is much worse. But on the tax changes, their bottom tax rate of 19% is going to be reduced to 16% on 1 July. Their next tax bracket, 32.5%, is going to 30%, and they're raising the thresholds for the top two tax brackets, so that 37% tax rate cuts in now at $135,000 Australian, and their 45% tax rate cuts in at $190,000 Australian. Now, we may be bringing in some changes in our own budget, but we have to compete with the Australians, and we're well aware of the migration numbers and the drivers for people looking to improve their incomes and repay debt and get ahead. We've just got to get more competitive. And a budget that tries to stem some of the issues from the last government doesn't really address competing in the world.
Australian economy and the New Zealand economy, though, is that the Australian economy has a vast extractive industry of metals that the world wants and will want for decades to come. We have nothing like that underpinning our economy. We are very much commodity price driven and still very dependent upon our agricultural, tourism and horticultural sectors, etc. Can we really compete, Craig?
Well, we've got to compete for talent. There's no question about that, whether that's improving our education system or attracting those skilled migrants that you mentioned earlier on. And I'm not sure I agree with your analysis of the opportunity set. It does rain, the grass grows. We can produce food that the world wants. So we've developed that into value-added products. That means that we're not exporting commodities, but we're actually exporting, food ingredients, foods as opposed to ingredients into food. So I disagree with it. I think the opportunity is still in front of us to develop that. Yes, Australia has natural resources, and we're very lucky to have them as a neighbour. They're one of our best destinations for exports. They're a big supporter of us in our direct capital investment. So I think you need imagination in business. You need a government that will allow businesses to flourish more. We need more progressive attitude to foreign direct investment to enable people to come here and bring ideas and develop what we have here.
I'm not arguing against foreign investment, and I'm not arguing against PPPs either, private-public partnerships, which is what you seem to be suggesting is an answer to some of our infrastructural woes. I'm just wondering, though, if it's realistic that New Zealand can ever compete with an economy that is so well founded upon what the world wants. I know the world might want food, Craig, but lots of countries produce food.
Well, not all of them are exporters of food, of course. We're a very large exporter of food compared to our domestic production. Not all nations are like that. And it's the type of food that people want. If it's proteins grown sustainably, then it's a huge market for us and will continue to do so as the middle classes of Asia continue to develop, both as sources for tourism but also destinations for our exports. So, if we don't adjust, we will continue to have declines in our standard of living. What can we do to encourage more innovation, more entrepreneurialism to enable us to export more? We shouldn't be sitting at 25% of GDP as exports. We should be much higher than that. We should be closer to some of the Scandinavian countries. So how do we do that? Well, we need to unleash some entrepreneurialism. We need more innovation. We need more drive from our businesses, and that goes to the attractiveness of our taxation settings. It goes to research and development. It goes to the government reducing barriers that are holding us back on providing goods and services for our people and for buyers of our exports.
So, just if I can extrapolate that for just a second, and I'd be interested in your view on. We had Dr. Paul Spoonley on the show just prior, an interview just after 11 o'clock, talking about the number of New Zealanders that have left this country in the last 12 months for seemingly permanent reasons, and he was saying, in actual fact, the gross number is $78,000. That's what we should be concentrating on, and we don't do much research about why they're leaving either. But he suspects that they're exactly the kind of people that have the skills and the entrepreneurial ability that you're talking about, Craig. Is one of the reasons we don't have an entrepreneurial sector that's has the kind of innovation that you're talking about that will grow the economy is because we're losing the people who might do that?
Because you don't have the statistics to understand who's leaving and exactly the skill base of people that are coming, and it's really hard to know net what that means. People are living in different regions, they've got different skills, they're starting at different stages in their life, so I think it's really hard to get to a conclusion. What is really important is that for some reason, lots of people want to come here. Now, if they want to come here and start a life here with their resources, get an education and build businesses. That's terrific. The worst position is being a country that people don't want to come to. So in some senses, let's make sure we understand that's a good thing, that people want to come and work here. And how do we take advantage of that? In terms of the people that are leaving, how long they leave for? Is it permanent? Is it for debt repayment purposes? Is it for a career opportunity? It's really hard to know that. And we do know these things move in cycles. Overall, over a long period of time, of course, New Zealand's population has risen. I was looking at, I think it was Paul Spoonley's numbers. The average number of children in the 1950s in New Zealand through a family was about 4. Mm. At the moment, it's about 1.7, which is almost below the replacement rate. So actually, we need immigration. We need people to come in to augment our population, in my view, to provide kind of the diversity of outcomes that you value when you travel overseas. You have all those things here. So immigration's critical to feeding all sorts of outcomes for us, which workers for our businesses. It's different types of foods and experiences that we have when people set up shop here. So it's really important that we value them and figure out, maybe we do need to ask why people are leaving, but as long as net we're improving, I'm a little bit agnostic about it.